Your numbers are amateur, Victoria. Sit down. You're embarrassing yourself.
And you're embarrassing me.
This is a 2 billion naira fund, not a village savings group.
Thank you for your feedback, Richard.
Richard Adeyemi's voice cut through the summit hall, sharp enough to silence a room of hundreds. The room went still. Phones rose into the air, ready to capture what came next. Victoria did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She did not defend herself. She simply looked at her husband, closed her laptop, and walked off that stage without a single tear, without a single word of protest. And somehow, that silence was louder than anything she could have shouted. Nobody in that room understood what they had just witnessed. They thought they had watched a wife get humbled in public. They thought the story ended there. They were wrong. They had just watched a countdown begin. Backstage, Victoria's best friend Ugo was waiting, arms crossed, jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. "I am going to kill him," Ugo said, slowly, with a toothpick. Victoria almost smiled. Almost. Not yet. "Oh, Vicky, he called you amateur in front of the entire industry, on camera." "I heard him. So what do we do? Go home and cry, or go home and plan?" Victoria glanced back toward the stage. Richard was already shaking hands and accepting congratulations. He was laughing like a man who had won something, not a man who had just humiliated his wife in front of hundreds of witnesses. "We go home," she said quietly, "to work." Ugo studied Victoria's face for a long moment, then slowly lowered her arms. She had known Victoria for 12 years. She had seen her heartbroken. She had seen her furious. She had never once seen her this calm. And somehow, that calm frightened Ugo more than any amount of shouting ever could. "Okay," Ugo said, pulling her car keys from her bag. "Where do we start?" Victoria's answer came without hesitation, without anger, without a trace of doubt, with his money. By midnight, Victoria's dining table looked less like a place for meals and more like a war room. Old files were spread across it in uneven stacks. Bank statements sat beside a laptop with 17 browser tabs open, each one leading somewhere new. Ugo sat across from her, scrolling through a folder she had not opened in 4 years. "I used to help Richard's company with quarterly filings, back before you two got married. Back when I still thought he was harmless." "He was never harmless." "No," Ugo agreed, "just very good at hiding it." She turned her laptop around so Victoria could see the screen. "Look at this. 3 separate payments to a company called Bright Path Logistics. No delivery records, no signed contracts, just money leaving every quarter for 2 full years." Victoria leaned in, studying the numbers. "Bright Path Logistics doesn't exist," she said. "I checked the corporate registry an hour ago." Ugo sat back slowly, absorbing what that meant. So a company that doesn't exist has been quietly collecting money from a company that's very real? Yes. "Vicky, this isn't sloppy business." Ugo allowed herself a small, humorless smile. "This is criminal business." For the first time all night, Victoria almost laughed. "Careful," she said. "You're starting to sound like him." "God forbid," Ugo shivered. "I would rather be broke and honest." They walked until 3 a.m, chasing names and dates. Most led nowhere. Then, without warning, one led somewhere important. Every dead end quietly opened into a new question. By the time Victoria finally closed her laptop, she had a folder full of unanswered questions and one feeling she could not shake. This was not a small mistake buried in old paperwork. This was a pattern. And she knew from experience that patterns always trace back to the person who built them. Across town, Richard Adeyemi stood on his balcony, phone pressed to his ear. He was replaying the summit in his mind, a loop he could not turn off. His father, Kenneth, called just after midnight. You embarrassed your wife in front of the entire industry. Do you understand what you've done? I told the truth, Dad. Her numbers were weak. Her numbers were fine, Richard. Your ego is the problem. Richard pressed his forehead into his fingers. Is there anything else? You didn't call at midnight to lecture me about my marriage. A long pause followed, long enough that Richard almost asked if the call had dropped. There are some old filings from years ago. I need you to leave them alone. Don't touch them. Don't ask questions. What filings? Richard, his father's voice dropped low, almost pleading. For once in your life, listen to me without arguing. Dad, you are scaring me. Good, his father said quietly. You should be scared. The line went dead. Before we continue, if you are enjoying Victoria's quiet transformation from humiliated wife to something far more dangerous, tap that like button. Tell us where you are watching from in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Rosa Tales for more unforgettable stories. Now, let's get back to it.
Victoria arrived at Emenike's office at 9 in the morning, wearing sunglasses she didn't need indoors. I would like to remain anonymous, she said, sliding a folder across his desk. Emenike was a federal financial crimes investigator with tired eyes and a chipped mug beside his keyboard. He looked at the folder, then at her. Ma'am, you walked into a federal building with a driver waiting outside in a car that still has your husband's company logo on the door. Victoria glanced toward the window. The car was, in fact, parked in plain view. That is not ideal. No, ma'am, it is not. She sighed and sat down anyway. Fine. My name is Victoria Adeyemi. My husband is Richard Adeyemi. I believe his company has been laundering money through shell businesses for years. Emenike opened the folder slowly, flipping through bank statements and payment records. His eyebrows lifted a little higher with each page. This is thorough, he said. I am thorough. Why bring this to us? Most spouses just take half the house in the divorce. Victoria's expression didn't shift. He humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, publicly, on camera. I'm not interested in half. Emenike leaned back in his chair, studying her. What are you interested in? She said. The truth, wherever it leads. He watched her a moment longer, then closed the folder. I can't promise anything will come of this. These things take months, sometimes years. I understand. And if this is personal, he added, choosing his words carefully, if you are only doing this out of anger, it will fall apart. Federal cases aren't built on revenge, they're built on evidence. Victoria rose, straightening her jacket. Then it's a good thing I brought both. She walked out past the front desk, past a security guard who barely looked up from his phone. Emenike sat alone with the folder for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. It's me, he said. I think we finally have something on Adeyemi Telecom. A pause. No, not rumors this time. Documents. Richard's office sat on the top floor of a glass building that seemed to scrape the clouds themselves. He was scrolling through investor emails when Mike walked in without knocking. We need to talk, Mike said. Can it wait? I have a call in 10 minutes. No, Richard, it cannot wait. Mike had been Richard's lawyer for 6 years and a friend for even longer. He rarely raised his voice. He was raising it now. Your father asked me to review some old company filings before you took over as chief executive. And? Richard asked. And there are gaps, big ones, money moving to companies that don't exist, tax documents that were never filed. Richard leaned back, unbothered. Every big company has messy paperwork somewhere. Fix it and move on. This isn't messy paperwork. Mike set a folder on the desk. This is enough to put people in prison. Richard finally looked up. People or me? Mike didn't answer right away. I don't know yet, he admitted, but your father knows something he isn't telling you. Richard sat in silence, then laughed, although it didn't quite reach his eyes. My father built this company from nothing. He would never risk it. Maybe, Mike said quietly, or maybe he already risked it a long time ago and you're the one who is going to pay for it. The words settled heavily in the room. Richard's assistant knocked and leaned her head in. Sir, your 2:00 is here. The one who keeps asking if the coffee is imported. Richard blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. Tell him it's imported. Tell him anything. Just keep him happy. She disappeared, and despite himself, Mike nearly smiled. Some things never change, he muttered. Focus, Richard said, the humor gone from his face as fast as it arrived. Find out what my father is hiding. Quietly. I don't want a scandal before the merger closes. Mike picked back the folder. You should be more worried about a scandal after it closes. He walked out, leaving Richard alone with a feeling he wasn't used to. Doubt. Victoria launched her fund on a Tuesday morning. The name alone made Richard's own investors sit up straight. Horizon Capital. No press conference, no grand stage, just a website, a short statement, and 15 calls made personally, one investor at a time. The first call went to Adeaze Briggs, a woman who had sat in the front row at the summit and laughed at Richard's insult. Mrs. Briggs, this is Victoria Adeyemi. Victoria, a pause. I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have laughed that day. You don't owe me anything. I'd like to talk business instead.
Exactly. Victoria explained her fund in 6 sentences. No fluff, no desperation. Just numbers, structure, and a track record that spoke for itself. By the end of the call, Adeze had agreed to a meeting. Ugo, listening from across the room, gave a slow, impressed nod. You didn't even mention Richard once. Why would I? Victoria said, already dialing the next number. This isn't about him. It's a little about him. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. Fine, it's a little about him. Over the following 2 weeks, 5 more investors agreed to meetings, then 8, then 12. Word began spreading through the industry, the way important news always does, not through headlines, but through quiet conversations at lunch tables and golf courses. Richard's wife, the one he humiliated on stage, was building something real, and people were paying attention. At a co-working space downtown, Victoria sat across from a nervous investor named Tunde. He kept adjusting his tie every few seconds. I have to ask, Tunde said, is this personal, between you and your husband? Victoria closed her folder calmly. Every good business decision looks personal to the person losing money from it. Tunde blinked, then laughed, caught off guard by the answer. He signed before the meeting even ended. That night, Ugo poured 2 cups of tea and slid one across the table. You know he's going to find out eventually, about the fund, about the investors. Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I'm counting on it. Sunday dinner at the Adeyemi family compound was loud, warm, and as always, a little chaotic. Richard and Patience sat at the head of the table, spooning jollof rice onto plates faster than anyone could finish them. Victoria, she said, not looking up from the pot, I heard about the summit. A wife should support her husband in public, not challenge him. The table went quiet. Victoria set down her fork calmly. And a husband shouldn't humiliate his wife in front of a room full of strangers. But here we are. A young cousin at the far end snorted into his drink, trying to hide his laughter. And Patience opened her mouth, then closed it again. She clearly didn't know how to respond to a woman who refused to flinch. Richard shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Auntie, please, not today. I am only saying what everyone is thinking, she muttered, returning to the rice pot with slightly more force than necessary. Kenneth, seated across from his son, said nothing. He watched Victoria with quiet, careful eyes, the way a man watches a storm he knows is already coming. After dinner, as the family scattered into different corners of the compound, Kenneth pulled Richard aside near the garden. "You should be careful with her," Kenneth said. "Careful? Dad, she's my wife, not a business rival." Kenneth's expression darkened. In this family, sometimes there is no difference. What does that mean? Kenneth glanced toward the house, making sure no one stood close enough to hear. "It means you married a woman who does not forget, and you gave her a very good reason to remember." "You are overreacting." "I hope so," Kenneth said quietly. "For your sake." He walked back into the house without another word. He left Richard alone in the garden, uneasy for reasons he couldn't quite name. Inside, Victoria helped clear the plates, laughing softly at something one of the younger cousins had said. She looked completely at peace. And that, considering everything she was quietly building behind the scenes, worried Richard more than any argument ever could. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by courier to Adeyemi Telecom's front desk. Federal Financial Compliance Notice. Richard's assistant brought it in, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, this looks official." Richard tore it open, scanned the first paragraph, then laughed out loud. "An audit. Someone's jealous of our merger and wants to slow us down." He tossed the letter onto his desk. "Call accounting. Tell them to prepare the usual documents." Mike, sitting across from him, didn't share his confidence. "Richard, look at the department code. This isn't standard compliance. You're overreacting. And you don't worry enough." Mike picked the letter back up, reading it more carefully this time. "This is coming from the Financial Crimes Division, not standard compliance." Richard's smile faded, just slightly. "You're overreacting, just like my father." "Your father is overreacting too?" Mike raised an eyebrow. "Maybe that should tell you something." Richard waved him off and turned back to his screen, though his hands weren't quite as steady as before. Later that afternoon, Richard's accountant, Emmanuel, appeared at the door, pale. "Sir, I pulled the requested documents, some of the older transaction records. I can't locate the supporting invoices." "Then find them." "Sir, some of these transactions are 7 years old, before I even joined the company." Richard stood, irritation flashing across his face. "I don't care how old they are. Find the paperwork or create new explanations. This audit needs to disappear quietly." Emmanuel hesitated at the door. "And if I can't find anything, sir, because there is nothing to find?" The room went still. "Get out," he said quietly, "and don't repeat that sentence to anyone." Alone, Richard picked up the audit letter again, reading it more carefully this time. For the first time since the summit, something unfamiliar crept into his chest. Fear. The boardroom at Meridian Group was full when Victoria walked in, sharp, folder in hand, calm as still water. Richard was already seated at the far end, mid-pitch, unaware his wife had just entered the building. He looked up and stopped mid-sentence. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for my turn," she said simply, taking a seat near the door. The room shifted uncomfortably. Richard cleared his throat and continued, though his rhythm had noticeably changed. When he finished, the lead investor, a sharp woman named Chioma Basse, turned toward Victoria. "Mrs. Adeyemi, I understand you have your own proposal as well." "I do." Richard's jaw tightened. "This is unprofessional." "Is it?" Victoria rose and walked calmly to the front of the room. "We're both business owners, presenting to the same investors in the same industry. That sounds like Tuesday to me." A soft laugh moved through the room. Even Chioma smiled. Victoria's presentation was short, direct, and confident. No wasted words, just numbers that made sense and a plan that felt safe. "Mrs. Adeyemi, I like to move my investment from Adeyemi Telecom to Horizon Capital." The room went completely silent. Richard shot to his feet. "Chioma, we've worked together for 5 years." "Yes," Chioma said, gathering her things. "And in 5 years, you've never once shown me the kind of composure your wife just showed in 5 minutes. She shook Victoria's hand and walked out, ignoring the stunned look on Richard's face. Richard turned to Victoria. voice low and tight. "What are you doing to me?" Victoria closed her folder gently. "I'm doing exactly what you taught me. Business is business, nothing personal." She walked out, leaving Richard standing alone at the head of the table, watching his empire begin to slip through his fingers. Kenneth found his son alone in the dark study of the family compound, a half-empty glass in his hand. "Kenneth, you lost Chioma's account." It wasn't a question. Word travels fast. In this industry, bad news travels faster than good news. Richard set the glass down harder than he meant to. "Dad, I need to know what's in those old filings now. No more secrets." Kenneth sat across from him, quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that comes before something heavy. 15 years ago, this company almost collapsed. A failed expansion, debts we couldn't cover. I made a decision to save it. I moved money through companies that didn't really exist, long enough to cover our losses, stabilize the business, and pay everything back quietly. "Did you pay it back?" "Some of it, not all." "Dad," Richard's voice cracked, "that's the empire you always told me to be proud of." "It saved your inheritance. It's going to destroy it." Kenneth's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the old family photo on the shelf. "I did what I thought was right at the time. I never imagined it would surface after all these years." "Well, it's surfacing now," Richard snapped, "and I'm the one standing in front of it." For the first time in his life, Richard saw his father look genuinely afraid. "There has to be a way to fix this," Kenneth said. "There isn't." Richard began pacing. "Federal investigators already have documents, real ones. Someone gave them everything." Kenneth's eyes narrowed. Who would have access to files that old? Richard stopped pacing. Slowly, painfully, the pieces fell into place. Old company records, quarterly filings, someone who had worked closely with the business years ago before stepping away. "Ugo," Richard whispered. "Victoria's friend?" Richard sat back down, the weight of it crushing him. "She used to handle our filings before Victoria and I got married." He rubbed his face with both hands. "This wasn't luck. This wasn't an accident." "What are you saying?" Richard looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying my wife has been building a case against me for months." Richard arrived at Victoria's office unannounced, his tie loosened, his usual confidence replaced by something raw. Victoria looked up from her desk, unsurprised. "I wondered when you'd show up." "You've known," Richard said, "this whole time, about the audit, about my father, about everything." "Not everything," she corrected calmly, "just enough. Enough to destroy me." "I didn't destroy anything, Richard. I simply stopped protecting a lie I was never part of." "You could have talked to me first, warned me." "Like you warned me?" she asked. Her voice stayed steady, but sharper now. "Before you called my work amateur in front of hundreds of people on camera, did you warn me?" Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I built something real," Victoria continued. "You tried to tear it down publicly to make yourself look bigger. I simply let the truth do what truth eventually does." "So this is revenge?" "No," she stood, walking slowly around the desk. "Revenge would have been screaming at you in that boardroom. Revenge would have been leaking your secrets to the press for entertainment." She stopped in front of him. "This is consequences, Richard. There's a difference." His shoulders sagged, the fight slowly draining out of him. "What happens now?" "That depends on the investigators and your father's decisions from 15 years ago, not on me." Richard studied her face, searching for anger, satisfaction, anything familiar. He found only stillness. "I never thought you were capable of this," he said quietly. "You never thought I was capable of much. That was always your first mistake." She returned to her desk, and he turned and walked out.
The raid happened on a quiet Wednesday morning. Exactly the kind of ordinary day nobody expects to remember. Agents arrived at Adeyemi Telecom's headquarters at 7, before most employees had settled at their desks. Emenike led the team himself. Richard was still at his penthouse when his assistant called, her voice shaking. "Sir, they're here. Federal agents. They have a warrant." "For what exactly?" Everything, sir. 20 minutes later, agents moved through his home with quiet efficiency, boxing up documents, laptops, and phones. Richard stood by the window watching his life get carried out in cardboard boxes, saying nothing. Across town, in a quiet law office, Victoria sat at a long table finalizing paperwork of her own. It was the acquisition of Adeyemi Telecom's core assets, purchased through Horizon Capital at a fraction of what the company had been worth 6 months earlier. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Federal agents raid Adeyemi Telecom headquarters amid financial crimes investigation. Ugo leaned over to read it, eyes wide. Vicky, it's actually happening. Victoria set her phone face down, her expression calm, almost tired. It was always going to happen. I just made sure it happened the right way. News of Richard's arrest spread before the afternoon traffic even began. By evening, his face was on every business channel, walking out of his penthouse in handcuffs. 2 weeks later, Victoria visited him at the federal detention facility, dressed simply, no cameras trailing behind her. "You came," he said, surprised. "I had paperwork to finalize nearby," she said. "I thought I'd stop by." He studied her face. "Are you happy, now that it's all over?" "I'm not happy that you're here, Richard. I never wanted this for you specifically." She paused. "But I'm not sad either. I feel nothing, which surprises me more than anything else." "You deserve that." "Yes," she agreed simply. "You do." "For what it's worth," he said, "I am sorry. Not because I got caught, because of how I treated you. That day, and honestly, long before it. I believe you, but apologies don't undo consequences, Richard. They just help you carry them a little easier." He nodded slowly, accepting it without argument. She noted he had never done that before. She stood to leave. "Victoria," he caught her at the door. "If I could go back to that stage, I would do everything differently." "I know," she said quietly, "but you didn't. And now we both have to live with what happened instead." 6 months passed. Horizon Capital's headquarters buzzed with quiet, steady energy. A young accountant walked in nervously, asking for honest work. It was Emmanuel, the same man who had once refused to falsify records for Richard. By the end of the conversation, he had a new position starting Monday. "Building your own little army of honest people," Ugo said, grinning, "one hire at a time." "Someone has to," Victoria replied. That evening, Kenneth, out on bail awaiting his own trial, sent her a short message. "Thank you for the meeting today. It meant more than you know." He had visited earlier that day, asking only for a chance to apologize, not for legal reasons, personal ones. Victoria listened, accepted it without excusing him, and let him leave with nothing more than a handshake. Some bridges, she realized, didn't need to be burned completely. They simply needed to be walked away from, calmly and permanently. A year after the summit that started everything, Victoria stood on a different stage entirely. The same room, the same industry, but this time she stood at the podium, not beside it. "A year ago, in this very room," she began, "my ideas were amateur, that I was embarrassing myself. A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Today, Horizon Capital manages assets worth 3 times what I proposed back then." Applause rose gently. "But that's not the lesson I want to leave you with," she added. "Never let someone else's cruelty define your worth. Let it define your patience instead. Success delayed by disrespect is still success. It just arrives with better timing and a stronger foundation." The audience rose into warm, genuine applause. Backstage, Ugo waited with a proud grin. "You didn't even mention his name once." "Why would I?" Victoria said. "This was never about him." "It was a little about him." Victoria laughed, genuinely this time. "Fine, maybe a little." Miles away, in an apartment far smaller than his old penthouse, Richard watched the live stream on his phone. He was out on bail, still awaiting the final ruling on his case. He watched his wife, composed and confident, receive the recognition he once tried to take from her on that very same stage. He did not feel anger. For the first time in his life, he felt genuine respect. Somewhere between the humiliation he caused and the empire he lost, Richard Adeyemi had finally learned the one lesson his father never taught him. Real power was never about how loudly you spoke over someone. It was about how quietly you could rebuild everything they thought they had destroyed. And Victoria, calm as ever, had proven that lesson to the entire industry, one patient step at a time.
That's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you genuinely for sticking with me all the way to the end. If this story pulled you in even a little, do me a favor and tap that like button. It really does help Rosa Tales grow. And I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts or what part hits you the hardest. And if you're new here, subscribe to Rosa Tales. There are so many more stories waiting for you. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next tale.